Welcome to my vlog where I like to take a look at what's new and of interest in the Microsoft world. I found out recently that vlogs are so yesterday, apparently, that I should be looking at the new and latest thing to get my content out to everyone in the technology world. So I thought about this and I thought, well, if we had weblogs, then we had podcasts, and now we've got video logs. What's the next thing? Maybe it's a cloud blog or clog for short. So I need to get my clogs on and get that happening. Anyway, what are we looking at today? Back in October, November, I took a look at Windows Server 2019 from when it was just about to be released. I was still in technical preview. It was a video series called Lunch and Learn, which is available at www.jasco.net.au. Today, I want to take a look at three key areas that I think deserve a shout out. So let's head on over to update management and have a look. So the purpose of update management, while strictly not a Server 2019 only technology, in Azure is to centralize your update policies. If you don't have WSUS on premises, if you don't have SCCM on premises or Intune managing your updates centrally, Azure Update Management is a way to do that. So it starts here in automation accounts. Now, while I'm clicking into this, you need a couple of things to get going on this. One is a log analytics workspace, and then tied in with that log analytics workspace is our automation account that takes care of the update policies and distribution. So I'm going to go into my automation account and click on Update Management. And you'll see in here, I've got a summary of how my updates are looking. I've only got two servers here. Now, while they're called HOTST 2016-1 and -2, they are in fact 2019 servers, which I upgraded recently. I tried to break Storage Spaces Direct again and failed, which is a good thing. That's a story for another time, though. So what I want to have a look at here is basically a good summary of the information of the machines in my environment. I've only got two in my test environment, but of course you can understand the bigger your environment, the more information you're going to have here about how up to date you are, not just whether I'm compliant or not compliant, but what security updates I'm missing, what critical updates I'm missing, and what other updates I'm missing. So this is a good place to go and get a dashboard view, high level view of how you're looking. The bit that's of interest here is the deployment schedules. So if I go and have a look at deployment schedules, I've already got one here. I can go ahead and schedule another update deployment. I can add Azure VMs and add non-Azure VMs. And that's a good segue for me to talk about how do I add non-Azure VMs to this. So if I click on add non-Azure VMs, it's going to take me into my log analytics workspace. And I'm going to have a link to download the Microsoft Monitoring Agent. Some of you may know it as the OMS agent. That's what it was previously called. And I'm going to put in a workspace ID and a workspace key to this log analytics workspace that this update management and automation account is linked to. So once I've done that, the machines will show up. It takes a few minutes for them to show up in the Azure portal, and then past that, it takes a little bit of time for the software sync process to run, the inventory process, and to get an indication of how up to date we are on our servers. So going back to deployment schedules, if I can update a new schedule or create a new schedule, update deployment, I should say, or I can click here on one that I've already created, which is deployed to my Windows SSD cluster. And basically what this is going to show me is some very similar information to what you're probably already familiar with when you're configuring updates. So I've got a group that I want to target. In this case, I've got my default computer group. And from my default computer group, I've gone and I've selected the two servers that I want to be a part of this update schedule. As you guessed, you can have multiple update schedules. Then I can go ahead and choose which classifications I want. Now, this is going to look incredibly familiar to all of you. The critical updates, security updates, all of those updates that you're familiar with configuring that you want to deploy onto those machines automatically. I can go ahead and I can include and exclude some KBs. I can schedule when I want that process to run. So in this case, I'm saying I want my computers to check every 1 month. I'm going to start at 1 a.m. on the 16th of the 5th. I'm going to go on the 20th of each month. And that's my schedule to go and check for updates for those machines. I've got a maintenance window there of 180 minutes. So that's going to take place from that 1 a.m. time frame when these machines go ahead and check for updates. And they've got 3 hours to go ahead and install and reboot if they need to, dependent on the options I set here. So in this case, I'm saying, yep, I want to reboot if required, or you might have some sensitive servers that you want to manually schedule a reboot for. You have to put some change management around that. So I could say never reboot those systems. Once I've done that, my schedule's done, ready to go. Those servers now have an update deployment schedule. Easy, straightforward, and centrally managed without any additional infrastructure on premises. So let's change gears and let's head on over to the Windows Admin Center and let's have a look at REFS data deduplication. So I'm going to click into my storage spaces direct cluster. I'm going to go and have a look at the volumes here. I've got an REFS cluster shared volume on this cluster. The whole purpose of data deduplication is, as you guessed, to deduplicate data. If you've got duplicate blocks of data on a volume, you don't want to waste that space. You want to make the best use of space on a volume. Because as much as disk is cheap, you still want to make the best use of that disk in your on-premises environments, right? Or even on virtual workloads, say file servers running in Azure. Now, to turn on deduplication and compression, there's an integrity checksum option, which I don't have. I just go ahead and I click this slider that says turn deduplication and compression on. I click on the start button there. And then I go ahead and select a workload type that I want to enable deduplication for. So in this case, default is things like file servers, Hyper-V workloads, and backup. The backup profile is more about things like Azure Backup Server or Data Protection Manager workloads that are running on that REFS volume. So once I've done that, I would have clicked enabled and deduplication compression would be turned on. That'll take a little bit of time to run. So here's one I prepared earlier. Volume one, let's go and have a look at that. So I'd enabled deduplication on this about a week and a half ago, and I have 49.7 gigs. So it's not a massive volume, but I've saved 50 gig out of my 150 gig volume. I think there was about 100 gig of data here originally, which is 51%. That's a pretty significant saving. So what's on this volume? Why would I be getting a great rate? Why would I be getting 50% of data deduplication? It could be a couple of things. I've got virtual machines here that run similar operating systems. So probably 2016, maybe some 2019, but there'd be a lot of common blocks of data that the deduplication engine has gone through and removed and put pointers to instead. So you can see I've got here an Azure Backup Server, a couple of SQL servers, a Nano Test server, and a Server 2016 server. So a little bit of variation there, and I'm still getting about 50% of data deduplication, which I think is pretty fantastic. So what to look out for when you're using data deduplication? Obviously, you need to be careful about the workloads. You need to be aware of the additional I/O when data deduplication is scheduled to run. There are some CPU settings, there are some exclusion settings. So if you don't want a particular VM, in my case, to be enabled for data deduplication, I can exclude that folder that contains that VM or exclude some files from data deduplication as well. But it's certainly a technology worth looking at if you're looking to save or make the best use of the storage space that you have. So let's stay in the Windows Admin Center for a little bit longer. And not just because I think that the Windows Admin Center is a fantastic management tool, one of the best that I've seen come out of Microsoft for a long time, but because this is where we enable the storage migration service to be run from. So let's go and have a look at my test 2019 server. And what we're going to do once the Windows Admin Center loads down here is have a look at the storage migration service. Now, the whole purpose of the storage migration service is what we should have had years ago. It's a tool for migrating file servers. And there's our migration storage in 3 steps, or migrate storage in 3 steps, I should say. It's what we should have had years ago to migrate from 2003 all the way to 2019 or 2016. And yes, you heard me right. We're going from the capability from 2003 servers using this utility all the way up to server 2019. And if you don't believe me, go and have a look here at the Microsoft documentation, scroll down to where it has the requirements for the source servers, and you'll see in that list right down the bottom, Windows Server 2003, which I think is absolutely fantastic. The Microsoft aren't saying this is just a tool to migrate 2016 to 2019. This is a tool to migrate you way, way back Windows Server 2003 servers all the way to 2016 or 2019. So what you can see in front of you is a job that I've got in my environment that I've already configured. I can go ahead and create a new job, but it's going to take a little bit of time to set up. So we'll go and have a look at the one that I've already created here. So there are 3 major steps, as you saw in that little splash dialog box that popped up when I first clicked on Storage Migration Service. And in there, we go ahead and we enter some credentials and we add and scan the devices that we want to migrate. So I can do multiple at once. I don't need to just do one at a time here. So once I've gone ahead and I've scanned a device, it'll go ahead and show me the shares on that device, the configuration, the network adapters, and the volumes. In my case, it's a simple server. It's only got a C drive with a single C drive data share. And you can see that it's gone through and it's telling me the size, how many files, and has it succeeded in my scan. So once I've done my scan and I know the data that I want to migrate across to my new server, then I can go ahead into the transfer data, enter some credentials again for the destination, and select my destination server. In this case, it's a server called 2019 O2V. So I'm going 2019 to 2019. I don't have any 2003 servers in my test environment. And there's a summary here of the volume and the shared data that we're going to migrate. And we can go ahead once we've selected that that's what we want to include and go and adjust some settings. Do I want my validation file, my validation type rather, to be CRC64? What's my maximum duration for this transfer to run? How many retries and how many delays between retries? Anyone who's done a file server migration before, if you've used Robocopy, those are familiar options to you, right? If a file's in use, you want to retry, but you don't want it to hold up the whole copy job. And one of the things to point out here is that at the end of this process, you get a summary of everything that was done. So if you want to be 100% sure from a logging point of view that you've grabbed everything you need to before you migrate the server, that information is available to you. Once you've got your transfer settings set, we can go ahead and run through a validation. So the whole point of a validation is to say, am I ready to migrate? Have I met all the prerequisites? Don't get halfway through or transfer all my data and then find that we didn't have the permissions that we need. So in my case, I've got a few warnings here. The credential has administrative privileges. That action isn't available remotely. I know it does. I've verified that. The destination proxy isn't registered. I'm not using a destination proxy, so that's okay. Everything else is a pass, so it looks good in my environment. I've got no other conflicts, so I'm good to go ahead and continue on. There's a summary of my transfer settings, and then I can go ahead and start my transfer. Now, what the transfer does, exactly what it says, transfers data across. Now, that's when my last transfer was run. You can see the start time and the end time on screen. Now, I can kick that off a number of times. So if I want to do a pre-stage and get most of my data across, and then closer to when I'm ready to migrate this server, transfer again, and then cut over, I can go ahead and do that. So there's some transfer detail here. You can see I've got a transfer log. So if I click on the transfer log, that's going to show me, let's open that up. It's going to show me absolutely everything that it did in that transfer. Let's have a look with Notepad. Everyone uses Notepad still, right? And you can see there's a complete summary of absolutely everything that we have grabbed in our transfer. So at this point, I don't have to go any further. If I've actually transferred my data and I want to maintain the source server's identity and I want the new server to be a different identity and I want to change my login scripts or whatever else that I need to do to give people access to that new server, then I can stop here. I can do my final transfer, change my settings, people start using the new server. The third option here, cut over to the new servers, is how I change the identity of my server. So once I've entered my credentials again, I go and select how I want that behavior to happen. So which destinations Ethernet adapter do I want to take the IP address of the source server? What IP address am I going to give the source server after it's been renamed, because my destination server is going to take its IP address and its identity. So I don't need to, if my share names are the same, I don't need to change anything in my login scripts or anything in the way that people are accessing any other drive mappings or any other methods they're using to access the identity and the shares on that new server, because that'll be grabbed from the old or the source server, which I think is a fantastic feature. This is something we've been missing for a while. And basically when I'm done, I go through, I'm not going to actually finish this on my test environment, but you would go through and uh, adjust your settings again, validate the configuration, and then start the cutover. And I'm done. My server is migrated. How simple is that? That is fantastic. So I think what you'll notice here out of the three technologies that we've covered today, update management, EFS deduplication, and storage migration service, is that apart from being some really great technologies, the effort here is to make these processes easier to manage and more efficient to use, and not just for cloud services. So the focus here, particularly for the update management component is on-premises management as well as Azure management. So we're seeing a great link between the two technologies and a great way to manage those. Anyway, I hope that that's been valuable to you. I hope you've enjoyed the content today. Until next time, keep deduplicating.